The big room. Good morning. I'm a little bit nervous, so
Take your time.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is actually my fourth Malloy, and I couldn't be more excited to be in Cooperstown for this great conference. The title of my presentation is "You Don't Have to Cry for Satchel Paige Today," and the purpose of the presentation is to talk about Paige's death and also how it was a celebration of life, but also how it fuels baseball research. Maybe I'll pitch forever. So how is it possible that Satchel Paige died? But he did, and it was quite the shock. He passed away on June 8th, 42 years ago today, in 1982, and it was a surprise. He was 75 years old and just a few weeks shy of his 76th birthday. Yes, he had been sick with emphysema and some heart issues, but everybody kind of had this thought that he would live forever and that he would pitch forever. So it not only shocked Kansas City, his adopted hometown, but it shocked the baseball community, the entertainment community, the political community. People were very sad. It was quite the shock. Just a week earlier, oops. I go back. Sorry.
Left arrow goes back. Left arrow.
Awesome, thank you, sorry. Just a week prior to his passing, actually 3 days, Paige had the good fortune to have a baseball stadium, a youth baseball stadium named after him. It's actually called the Satchel Paige Stadium in Kansas City, and he was elated. He appeared at the event in a wheelchair, but he couldn't have been happier. The stadium is still used today. It hosts little league tournaments, junior high tournaments, high school tournaments. It was a lovely facility. So he was out in the community. He died actually after a large heat event and storms in the Kansas City area, and his family home had lost power. Excuse me. What was really interesting about his passing was that he kind of was almost in passing that he got his due, I guess you would say, that maybe he didn't get in life. I only listed 3 items from different newspapers here because there were thousands, but they were pretty much the same article that was picked up from many newspapers. But there was this praise for him. Part of it was that he was a true superstar, this genuinely great baseball player that had this amazing, unique career, but also that he was a great teammate, that he won at wherever he went, that he was a great supportive teammate, a great coach to his teammates. And of course, he was a wonderful storyteller. He really was a true gem on and off the baseball diamond. And I found that really fascinating that, you know, sometimes in life he didn't get that reception. What was really fascinating about Faith, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, what was really fascinating about Paige's funeral, he died on a Tuesday, his funeral was on a Saturday. And I think the Paige family did a wonderful job of making his funeral a celebration of life. It was really about, let's celebrate this man and really enjoy all the positives in his life. Even his failures, you know, nobody was perfect. So it was really a wonderful opportunity to celebrate Satchel instead of mourning him. The other part that was so fascinating is that locally, all of the Kansas City news stations covered the event live. They covered the trip to the funeral. They covered the procession to the gravesite. It would, you know, nowadays, you know, they had no internet then, they had no Twitter then. So, but Nowadays, it would have just been minute by minute, and it was really fascinating that Kansas City invested that coverage in the Satchel. In addition, and this is my favorite part, if there you could have a favorite part about a funeral, Satchel Paige had 6 pallbearers that were family and friends, and then he had 13 honorary pallbearers. And I think that's a pretty fascinating and amazing thing. You know, he played on a lot of teams in many different cities around the US and Puerto Rico and Cuba and in Mexico. But yet he had 13 former teammates that showed up to be honorary pallbearers and to celebrate him. I think that shows what kind of a teammate he was and how well he was respected and loved. And also, I love the fact that he actually had 19 total pallbearers. Only Satchel could do that. Like I said, it really was a celebration of life. That's what now funerals are called today. He was way ahead of his time. You know, he always said that he was born at the right time, but sometimes Paige was ahead of things. What was interesting at his funeral is that many of his former teammates spoke about him, but also politicians and others. They shared their remembrances, they shared their laughs, they shared their love for him. These are just a few quotes. What I love about these 3 quotes, I won't read them because I know you all can read on the screen. What I love about these 3 quotes is they share the love for Satchel, but they also share about the joy that he brought to so many people and about his greatness, both as a person and as a baseball player. And I love that Buck O'Neill said, "You don't have to cry for Satchel Paige today," and mentioned that Paige was really on a different cloud level than the rest of us. And I think when you think about superstars of any sport, Paige really was that genuine, in my opinion, that genuine, true superstar for the Negro Leagues. And many people still today remember him because he was that well known. So I think that's a real compliment to Paige. Paige is buried at Forest Hills Cemetery. He's actually buried at a place called Paige Island at Forest Hills Cemetery in Kansas City. I was supposed to go to his grave in May, but due to a personal matter, I was not able to visit. I'm told that he is resting peacefully with his wife, LaDonna. I'm also told, which I've been told for 12 years, that baseballs just magically appear at his gravesite. In the past, I used to quibble and say that the balls are placed there, and I've stopped doing that because when I would tell people that the balls were placed there by a human, I would be told by former Major League Baseball players that they just appeared and that I was crazy. So now I say, since they say Paige pitches a game every day in heaven, I say the baseballs are just the first pitch he threw that day. And for some reason, nobody bats an eye. So he is resting well, and hopefully he's already started his game today and is doing well. Excuse me, I'm struggling a little bit here. Paige once said, "Don't look back." Don't look back. Something might be gaining on you. However, after his passing, the baseball research side of things boomed. And it was like, wow, suddenly there was a lot of research happening in the Black baseball space and a lot of research happening around Satchel Paige. Based on my research, I was able to identify 24 books that are specifically about Paige. There are many other books that are about Paige and other subjects as well. SABR has multiple projects that are dedicated to Paige. It's actually pretty awesome if you haven't been to the SABR site to go online and see the different games projects, the SABR bio, the SABR research paper article that's out there, as well as the journal articles. I mean, it's just page after page after page about Paige. It's really, really great, and I encourage all of you to check that out. It's almost like suddenly everybody wanted to know about Satchel Paige. In addition, the Negro Leagues Museum opened in Kansas City. The Hall of Fame has done presentations here. And of course, the Jerry Malloy Conference has been in existence since the late 1990s. But the question is why? Like, what made all of this research happen? And I have a couple of different reasons for why I believe it. The first reason is Satchel Paige truly was a superstar. You know, if he were playing today, he would be the player, the pitcher that you'd want to face his team the day he's making that start. And if he doesn't make the start that day, you definitely want to see him in the bullpen and get his autograph. He's that guy that would bring 40,000 people to the ballpark, in my opinion. And even if it's just to get a quote or hear a funny story, right? He just had that magnetism, and you know, he was, in my opinion, he was ahead of his time. There were other players that were like him, but he truly, truly brought that to the ballpark in addition to being a great player. I know there was Babe Ruth and other players, but Paige had it for the Negro Leagues in spades. The other side of things is Paige was a great storyteller. And I really truly believe that people wanted to know if his stories were true. So, and I know that sounds probably pretty terrible to say, but you know, he had many stories, and some of them seemed a bit outlandish. Did he really throw 300 no-hitters? Did he, you know, did Cool Papa Bell really make it to bed before the light went out? You know, all those different stories. And I think people were curious. They wanted to know how far Josh Gibson's home runs really were, because many of his stories were true as well. So I think that brought people interested in finding out about Paige as well. Most importantly, SABR made a commitment to Black baseball. Larry Lester, Dick Clark, Jerry Malloy, Leslie Heafy, Ted Moore, they really committed to doing that research. And of course, that the fruits of that labor is being felt this week with the statistics being interviewed with the major leagues. And so they invested in that. That gained popularity through the media. Other people became involved. And so I think SABR deserves a lot of the credit for their commitment to bringing exposing the interest in Black baseball. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. So there really is that commitment there. The other part is something you probably have never heard of, and that is the Satchel Paige Venn diagram. You're probably all, I see a couple of you kind of looking at me like, what is she talking about? So a Venn diagram, for those of you that don't know, that don't do analysis work or data analysis, a Venn diagram basically is when two subject areas are looked at, you look and see where the overlap is or where there is not overlap. And then it's normally represented by circles. And you could have 20 circles or two, but you're comparing two different areas. And I really believe, since Paige's passing, that there's a Venn diagram for just about anything in the sport of baseball. If you start looking at a diagram and saying, how does Satchel Paige fit into this subject matter? So let's walk through two different Venn diagrams that I've created as examples. So this first one here is about baseball leagues and baseball cities. Well, Satchel's in the middle, right? I kind of made this more perfect than a real true Venn diagram would be, but he played in the majors. He played in the Negro Leagues. He played in the minors. He played in Cuba. He played in the Dominican Republic. He played in Mexico. he's played in all these different locations, numerous cities around the country. And so you can see there's some overlap with him. He wasn't in South Dakota very long, but he was there, right? So if you were ever to do a research sub-project on who's played in the most cities, he would probably be on your list. I brought, speaking of Bismarck, I brought a bobblehead of Satchel Paige, and it's actually from his time in Bismarck. My mom sent it to me, and as I was doing this project, one of the things I realized was, I think I forgot he pitched in Bismarck. He's pitched all in so many different places, right? And so using a Venn diagram is a great way to kind of see where there's overlaps, where there's gaps. You might not get a full 100%, but you'll at least get a story, like a starting point. My favorite Venn diagram is the pitching Venn diagram. This is really small. I could do one for, I could have 50 items on here, but I just did something small. Because when you think about Paige, often people think about him being 42 years old and being a rookie. There was so much more to his pitching. They talked about him having a tired arm. Well, when I think of him having a tired arm, I think of him pitching 4 to 5 innings. Well, in today's world, that's a starting pitcher in big league baseball. So again, he was ahead of his time. So, you can see those different connection points. And even if he's not, like I said, he may not be the subject matter that you end up covering. He might have a connection to that subject. So he told us to not look back, and we're not supposed to break that rule. It's one of his cardinal rules. But I believe we do need to look back because there's so much to be gained and there's so much for us to learn. And I truly believe there are many more Satchel Paige stories and other stories out there that are left to be discovered. If we start out by saying, where does Paige fit into this story? The pieces will connect in the puzzle. I'm 200% convinced of that. And even if they don't connect, I guarantee you'll have a story because that was the gift of Paige. So in conclusion, one of the things on a personal note, today would have been my dad's 96th birthday. And I'm sure that he and Satchel are sitting up in heaven chatting and saying, what's all this fuss in Cooperstown? And I'm sure it's been quite the conversation. So don't look back. You don't have to cry for Satchel Paige today on the 42nd anniversary of his passing. Instead, I hope that you celebrate him. He had an amazing, well-lived life, lots of ups, lots of downs. He started out in juvenile detention, basically, and look where he ended up. He had a very successful career with championships, great pitches, a great sense of humor, lots of stories, and of course, wonderful wisdom to go along with that. I also encourage all of you to continue to do research and look at Satchel and where he fits into that picture. So, there are many talented players in the Negro leagues, in Major League Baseball, the major leagues, and Satchel is one of those, if not one of the best ones. So I thank you for your time, and I apologize for the technical difficulties, but thank you to Satchel for being a true gem on and off the baseball diamond.
We have time for questions for Melissa.
Did I put you to sleep?
I have a question. Have you ever visited his house in Kansas City?
No, so I was supposed to go in May, and unfortunately, I I had an eye surgery, so I wasn't able to. Have you been?
Yes, I have. Right before, actually, it was 3 years ago. So they didn't start the reconstruction with, remodeling the house and restoring it. So I just sat on the porch, left a
Oh, wow.
Coca-Cola there. So yeah.
Oh, wow. I've heard it was really cool, the porch alone and sitting on. And then did you sit in the rocker?
No, I did. I just sat on the stairs.
Yeah.
I didn't have too much time.
There's a big campaign to get that renovated now
Yeah.
after the fire.
Mhm.
And last I heard they were making great progress, as far as raising funds.
Right.
I hope they're able to do that. And did I hear correctly that the Kansas City parks are involved?
Yep. They're trying to make it like a national landmark.
Okay. That would be wonderful.
Thanks for a great presentation, Missy.
Thank you.
Do you happen to have a list of the 13 honorary pallbearers? And is there a story behind the misspelling of the word honorary?
Probably just me and my bad eye. And I just missed it probably, so I apologize. I have 10 of them. It's interesting that you asked that question. What's his name? Robinson. Slow Robinson was one of them. There's like a list of them. Monty Irvin was one. There's 3 that is not out there. I've looked at UPI, AP, Kansas City Star. I've gone back to the 3 local stations in Kansas City. I've even checked Dr. Spivey's book, and I've had no luck there. But everybody says there were 13 honorary pallbearers, spelled HONORARY. So.
Over here, sure.
Have you met any of the members of the Paige family?
I have not, because that was the event in Kansas City and I wasn't able to go that year.
When they were here for the conference, you remember how many years ago, and we had a number of the Paige family, and I think I still have that video of that, and I can send it to you.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to see it. What do you have, 7 children? And it sounds like they've all done really well and, are great members of the community.
Yes.
You mentioned your father and, from having a conversation and did your father get to see him pitch several games?
So my dad, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and most people in Columbus over a certain age, you were an Ohio State football fan, you followed the Reds in baseball and the Browns in football. My dad was kind of the exception because he figured if you're an Ohio team, he was going to support you. He's not like me. I'm a Reds fan. I'm not an Indians or Guardians fan. But in the 40s, when he got out of the service, they would do these bus trips and they'd go up to Cleveland. And I know he saw him pitch up there. It's a long answer to your question, but they would go up and see him. And, at that time, it was pretty exciting to see him pitch. So, but he was a different kind of fan. My dad just enjoyed being at the ballpark, he just enjoyed being at the game.
He spent more than half his life playing baseball or in a baseball uniform. Was he buried in a baseball uniform?
I asked that question, and there are 2 different reports. And one said he was in a brown suit, and one said he was in a Monarch's top. So I don't know if they changed something after the showing on Friday night, but there are definitely 2 different sources on that subject.
Any other questions? Sure, Gary.
I just have a comment. I'm sorry it came in late or not plowing some furrow you already plowed. The thing that strikes me about Paige is, I think the most important distinction about him is He is the only pitcher who ever shows up consistently in discussion of the greatest player ever. If you ask people who are the greatest players ever, Josh Gibson, Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, some old timers say Ty Cobb, Barry Bonds, Mike Trout. You go down the line, Oscar Charleston. But Paige is the only pitcher who ever shows up in those conversations. So for my money, that's the best distinction. He's the only pitcher who was even considered as the greatest player ever.
That's an interesting guy. I think part of that, I mean, this is just my opinion. I think that was his pitching repertoire, right? I think people forget sometimes that he was a pitcher. He had the quotes, he had this personality. And even when he was in Cleveland, he really was helping to support Larry Doby, right? But, he had quite the pitching repertoire, and he had multiple speeds in that repertoire, right? And there are stories about different people that faced him that would say that you never saw the same pitch twice from him. And I think we learned yesterday from Mark Armour's presentation that, when a Ted Williams says you need to be in the Hall of Fame, and Bob Feller and others, that they were not only great players themselves, but they know baseball. They've actually been on the field. And so I think that goes to your point. I mean, they know the game, in my opinion, much better than we know the game, right? They've been on those major league fields. So they saw him pitch and they saw his magic.
I would say what makes him apart is he is what I call one of a group of transformational players. And that means within baseball and beyond baseball, he transforms society as we knew it. And it was a much different society and game due to Satchel Paige. Do more to Satchel than pretty much anybody else.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, he was a cool cat.
I'm curious in your research about his death and funeral arrangements and all of that. Did the Kansas City Royals do anything formal or informal, a moment of silence at the ballpark? Did you come across anything about how the Royals front office decided to show its respect?
The Royals and the A's in Oakland, they both did that. But many major league teams, not just those two, held a moment of silence, but including the then Indians did, as well. They really celebrated him, right? They wanted to, and there were still players at that time that were living or coaches that had worked with him, the Braves, and he was a pitching coach there. So there were several teams. But he falls into that spot where ESPN was just getting started. There's not a lot of that video around anymore, and I just wish it would have been like 92 or 95, because I think there would have been a lot more videos. And listen to me getting greedy about when somebody dies. But you get my point. I mean, it would be great to have that video. There's even some of the articles. That's why I only listed those 3, because I used newspapers.com, a couple other archives. And what was interesting is that there's a lot of it was the same articles over and over and over and over again. The Star and Times did a great job in Kansas City, but they were just picked up by other cities. Even the columnists and the editorials were picked up. The one thing I will share with you real quick is that in Kansas City, the editorials that came in after his death, many people thanked the Paige family for allowing, like, the University of Missouri to do different interviews, for allowing people to be a part of the funeral. That was they were very grateful for that experience.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
That quote from Paige has been part of my life for a long time. I remember I played football in high school in the 1980s, and I fortunately broke it for a long run once, and Paige spoke to me and he said, and I could hear him saying, "Don't look back." Of course, I looked back and I was on the ground. But even today, every time I get in my car and I'm going a little bit too fast, and I look in my mirror, I'm like, look straight ahead, don't look back. And it just pops into my head at all times. So
No, it's a
that
great.
quote has really stuck with me my whole life.
No, it's awesome. It's a great quote. And I really think on the baseball research side, and there's, I just think I think this is the one time it's okay, I think he's probably turning in his grave, but I think it's okay. And I think he's probably very happy that all the research that's been done, the statistics that have been gathered, but also the stories that have been shared. He loved to tell those stories, and so people are still learning from him.
So
Quick comment. In many respects, Satchel Paige was the Muhammad Ali of baseball.
Thank
well,
you.
thank you, Melissa.